The first time I saw a Ferrari FF, I knew I wanted one. I like V12 Ferraris, I like estate cars, I like anything that looks like a BMW ZM3 Coupe with 4 seats reimagined by Maranello. The slight problem was that I didn't have the £300,000 needed to buy a new one, so I had to wait until new ones became old ones, and that time came earlier this year. It was still a crazy amount of money, nearly £160,000, but it was only 2 years old, had done 6,000 miles and had the perfect spec of Tour de France blue with tan leather and all clear glass. So what is an FF? It's a massive 4-seat coupe estate-ish thing running a 6.3 litre 660 horsepower normally aspirated V12 through a 4-wheel drive system more complicated than Saturn V. It's really just a collection of numbers that should be applied to a shin-high super speedster that happened to be slapped on something with 4 seats, like 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, 208 miles an hour top speed, and 12 to the gallon, if you're lucky. Oh, brakes are 398mm ceramics up front, tyres, they're normal Pirelli P0s. Now, can I afford a £160,000 car? Of course not. And this is where the great finance debate kicks in. I put a £45,000 deposit on the car, borrowed the balance from those lovely people at Ferrari Finance, and set myself a limit of, let's say, 6 months and maybe 6,000 miles. The payments were £1,400 a month, which is crazy, I know, but I just wanted to live with an FF, and if it cost me loads of money and everyone thought I was a pillock, well, I just didn't care. Sometimes you just have to do stupid things because you want to do stupid things. Now, ordinarily, I start these pieces to camera with the engine running, but you got to hear this. How expensive does that sound? And that's what's so special about FF ownership, is that everything about it makes you feel special. Everything about it makes you feel not just one cut above the AMGs and the Ms, 3 cuts above, and I love that. Let's go for a drive, tell you more about this frankly ridiculous motor car. I suppose in the year 2014 it's a given that any Ferrari is a good car to drive and that it's fast, but the FF really is a surprising device. Not because it is very competent or because it will cover ground at a rate that will make a light aircraft feel a bit embarrassed, but mainly because it makes the driver feel special at all speeds. And that's the thing that's really surprised me with my 5 months and 6,000 miles so far in this car. Quite often I feel frustrated if I've got an expensive car that's costing me loads of money on finance. Yes, piston headers, it's got finance on it. Because I'm driving down the motorway, coming back from the airport on a Friday night, and at 70 miles an hour in the lashing rain on the M4, I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing this? This car is not being used to its full potential. I might as well be in the diesel Passat for all the enjoyment I'm having. But I never feel that way in the FF. Even at moderate speed, it feels so special. I love the fact that it makes those lovely growly noises every time you accelerate. I love the cabin. There's a real sense of occasion. You just feel special. It brightens my day. And what price do you put on that? About £1,500 a month, actually. So we've got this quite strange layout. We've got a front mid-engine V12 so far back towards the front bulkhead that it is pretty much mid-engine. And then we've got this gearbox ahead of that feeds power to the front wheels. So the car is predominantly rear-wheel drive, and then the front wheels come in to kind of balance it out. It doesn't behave like a normal four-wheel drive system, and I tell you, I've been caught out once. The day after I took delivery of the car, I drove all the way from South Wales up to Snowdonia, and it was a bit icy, and I put my foot down a couple of times and got a lot more oversteer than I'd ever expected. So it's not a conventional four-wheel drive system, but it does give this car proper all-weather ability, whereas at 4 degrees ambient, an F12 in the wet is a proper handful, borderline unusable. You can't get much throttle down at all. In this car, you really can. You can go fast. Just keep your wits about you and keep the traction control on. I've learned that. Keep it on. It's so usable in the UK as well. We've got the old bumpy road button, which becomes absolutely perfect in all Ferraris now. So you just get in the car, the first thing I do is thumb that button, soften the dampers off, leave it in auto mode, and I have a car that really isn't much more difficult to drive than a conventional saloon car, with a couple of provisos. The gearbox can be a little bit abrupt at times. The problem with that is I think it's always learning what you're doing, and I'm always quite regularly giving it a punt. So every time I kick the throttle in manual mode and then drop back to auto, it expects me to be a bit of a hooligan and therefore hangs on to gears too long. But if you drive it steadily for 20 minutes, it relearns, which is clever. The other thing is the sheer size of the thing. It is massive. It's so wide that if I look at the white line on the right hand side of the road and think I'm quite close to that, and then look in that mirror over there, I'm pretty much on the white line that side as well. This was not built for British B roads, it doesn't fit. It was barely built for British A roads. And then there's the practicality of the thing. It's big, but it's also got lots of room. The rear cabin is fantastic. I don't spend much time sitting there for obvious reasons, but in the last 2 weeks I've driven this on some long journeys, and at least one person has fallen asleep in the back, and he wasn't a small man. So it's impressive, and the seats are a good shape, and they're lovely to look at, and it's just special, isn't it? It's just special. Perhaps the biggest difference, coming back to that transmission, between this and the 612, I ran a 612 as well once, I had one for a year, is that transmission. I can now leave it in auto mode and enjoy the car as a normal car, whereas beforehand the paddles were a bit too much. Now, of course, if I come out of auto mode, I've got this lovely fast gear change, which is an access point to one of the world's great engines, because that really is just a mildly detuned F12 engine up front. And I don't think I've ever been anything less than flabbergasted at how fast this car actually is. It has extraordinary speed, and I know the world's moving towards turbocharging, and I take some grief from everyone for being a bit too kind towards turbocharging, partly because I think that the turbocharging tank at the moment is really quite capable, handy and usable on the road, but when you drive this normally aspirated V12, you're spoiled. There is no way a turbocharged engine could do quite what this does in terms of noise and maybe response. Response, I suppose you could get close to, but it's just the noise. Come on, every time you're in it, you get to do this. It's stunning, it's absolutely stunning. And the instant that you kick down, the instant that you push that throttle, there's a sense of connection with the FF. The whole thing just comes alive and tightens up, and then you're away. And what had been a vehicle that you were travelling 4 up in and cruising suddenly becomes something that will monster a 911 turbo. And I don't know many other shapeshifters in the car world who can do that. But this thing is a weapon.
It isn't what you'd call normal, though. It brings new meaning to the phrase parking phobia, because it's so big and you're just terrified of opening a door onto something.
The driving position is just wonderful, really low. The car is lower than you think, that's why it looks so long. It is also very long. But the wheel is F12 style, right back at your chest, and you've got loads of adjustment as well, so you can come backwards and forwards. But the best thing is you do get the classic Ferrari dashboard that it shares with the 458 and the F12, full of theatre. Go to status and you get your oil and water temperatures, and you even get oil pressure. And voltage, to me, just looks cool as you like. Tyre pressure monitor too. The bit I really love though is this. This is just fantastic. Check this out. When you go to your trip, it even records how fast you've been going, which is incriminating and naughty, but I never ever tire of it. And look, there's a range number, but this car never talks about fuel economy because it's tragic and depressing, and by that I mean about 10 to the gallon. The seat is bigger and more comfortable than an F12 seat and another Ferrari seat. I love it. 3 heating positions to keep your bottom warm, lots of lumbar, no cooling. I'd like it to be cooled, but I suppose that's another £50,000 because the car's only 300 grand new to start with, isn't it? But then you switch to the passenger seat and it's even more comfortable. Because when you're riding shotgun in an FF, you get a lovely aluminium kick plate to put both your feet right out in front of you. Your bottom is nice and high, about the same height as your knees, but everything is just adjustable and movable. And if you want to, you can go quite a long way back and the person behind you isn't struggling. My car's a bit mean. For me, the best thing about being a passenger in a Ferrari in the front is that you usually have that expensive optional display there that gives you some information to look at and laugh at. But my car doesn't have that because it was about £7,000 when new. Instead, you have a little flap that you can push, and inside it there's a USB.
and that's as much as your entertainment is, I'm afraid. But still, you get to listen to the engine and maybe talk to me, because I'll be driving it. What's it like in the back?
And back here the FF becomes seriously surprising because the seating position is great, there's loads of knee room and leg room, and there's loads of headroom. That bread van shape of course opens the top up. This thing is really quite roomy. I'd say roomier than an Aston Rapide, and probably not far off many supposed bigger 4-seat GT cars. There's not many toys back here. You've got a couple of air vents. Everything's beautifully covered in leather. There's this massive armrest that has very little room in it. There's something underneath there, I'm not quite sure what. Crucially, there's a little cubby hole here. This is very useful, because what you do is you put in here the bits that trim that fall off. That's the leading edge of the prong that comes out to feed the seat belt to the front seat passenger. It's a Ferrari after all. Things are going to fall off. You've got to be relaxed about it. I still love this car. So that's where you put your bits. Look at that. Perfect. And when all's said and done, you can put on your Ferrari branded headphones and watch a film. And for me, my favourite trick of all is you can fold all the seats flat, and despite the fact the fuel tank sticks up in the middle, you can fit at least one mountain bike in the back. A Ferrari that carries a mountain bike. That in itself is the coolest concept in the car world.